Hello again. In this week's lecture, we're going to discuss HTML, CSS, web hosting, and CMS to help give you a broader picture of how these are used in web design. So HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language, it's a language that's used for describing web pages. So anytime I research this and I think about it, the first question I ask is, what does this really mean? And the best way for me to do that is to break it up into two different things. So you have hypertext. So all that hypertext really is, if you look at figure 1, it's just text that's displayed on a mobile device or computer that has links that you can read. So in the example, it says, how is AIGA investing in chapters? You can click on the link there, and it's going to take you to a new page. So that's what hypertext is. A markup language is code that it annotates text so that it can be displayed as a web page. So if you look at figure 2, that's the code that shows the image that you see in figure 1. So basically, there's additional text in between, the copy that you see. So the title, how is AIGA invested in chapters? Before that, there's a header tag, and it's code that's used that tells the computer to show the text in a certain way. In this case, it's bold and it's a larger typeface. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and CSS it delves into more details about how content is displayed on a website. So if you think of a website like a building, HTML would be the basic blueprint. It's the basic framework that shows you how it's going to be made. CSS would be more like the interior designer. It's going to define the colors of the walls, what type of carpet you use. It would define what types of windows you use. All those visual details that you really can't see in a blueprint, but are necessary for the complete design of the house. And that sort of analogy is kind of the best way to show what CSS is. So you want to think of HTML as a framework or language for describing web pages, and you want to think of CSS as additional code that helps to further define how visual elements are laid out on a page. And this leads you to the question, how do the two really work together? So if you look here, I try to show you an example of how CSS and HTML code can work together. So if you look on the left there, I have CSS code on the top, and that's where it says style type equals text CSS, and then it says dot text box, and it talks about margin top is 300 pixels, and the margin left is 150 pixels. So if you look on the right, that's what it does. It moves the content down 300 pixels and right 100 pixels. If you look at the bottom code, that's the HTML. So if you look, it says, div class equals text box. So within that div tag, it says try this out, and that's the content. So the content is try this out. The framework is simply a div tag, and the CSS is what makes it bold and places it down 300 pixels and to the right 100 pixels. So that's a little bit of how they're used together. once you design a web page, you're going to want to think about how you want to host it. So web hosting is the act of storing your website on a public server so that other people can view it. So, any type of website that you look at, if you can see it online, it's being hosted at a server. Most people like to host a server using a ISP, which stands for Internet Service Provider. So Internet Service Providers, they basically are companies that you pay them a monthly fee or an annual fee, and they house your website for you. So they have the server, they have all the hardware for it. All that you have to do is log in and upload your website, and they'll do the rest. An additional option that some people do is they actually have their own servers. Some companies, they like the control of having their own servers, but most people, they need to choose an ISP or an Internet Service Provider. If you ever want to make a website, or if you already have, you may already be familiar with this, but a few things that you want to consider with ISPs are, what type of customer service do they offer? You want someone with 24-hour support, because with websites, anything can go wrong at any time. You could be looking at your website, and then all of a sudden an entire page was deleted for some reason, and you're like, oh crap, I had to fix this now, but I don't know how, because it's just not working, because technology can be frustrating. You want to be able to call experts, and you want them to be available 24 hours so that they can fix those problems that can come up. Daily backup is important, because in the example of a web page being deleted, you're going to want them to be able to bring it back. And if they have daily backup, that means that every day the content of your website is being saved on their server, then that won't be a problem. Connection speed is important. Most ISPs have a fast connection speed, and what that is that's the speed at which the ISP can have your site be viewed by anyone else who's looking at your website online. So if it's a slow connection speed, your potential customer, they could have Fios, they could have the fastest internet possible, but if your server from your ISP has a slow connection speed, then then your customer is going to wait too long to look at your website. So connection speed has to be fast. And the last thing you want to consider with ISPs is traffic volume. Some internet service providers charge additional fees if your website becomes really popular and all of a sudden thousands of people are looking at it every day. So you want to be aware of what fees are involved with traffic volume. As you can see, I posted a good link that you can go to. It's shown a quick screenshot of it in Figure 1, web hosting review. And all that it does is it shows the top 10 internet service providers that you might want to consider, and it shows all the features and benefits and compares them, so you can compare multiple internet service providers, apples to apples, to see which one you want to choose. So that's web hosting. The last thing I want to talk to you about is a content management system. So we talked a little bit before about HTML and CSS, and they're used to make websites. But not everybody enjoys coding websites with HTML and CSS. It's a skill that not everyone has, but those people might want to still design their own website, and you can still design your own website without knowing HTML and CSS. And the way to do that is using a content management system. So a content management system is a tool used to create websites without the hassle of coding HTML or CSS. You can drag and drop visual elements such as photos or text boxes, and then it makes it a website. The advantage is it's convenient and it's easier for someone who doesn't have coding skills to do. The disadvantage is you're going to have less options as a designer if you don't know how to code a website, because content management systems typically don't give you every single option that the raw, coding in HTML and CSS is going to give you. But it's still an option that's worth checking out. So that's a brief summary of HTML, CSS, hosting, and CMS. So to review, HTML is a language that's used for describing web pages. It's the framework of a web page. CSS is the interior designer of a web page. It helps define the details of how text and images are shown and what style they're shown in on a web page. Web hosting is how you get your website up on the internet so that anyone can look at it. With websites, you want to use internet service providers to host your website. If you don't want to use HTML and CSS to build your website, then use a content management system, or CMS. That's a tool that's used to create a website without the hassle of coding. So there you go. HTML, CSS, hosting, and CMS. I hope this was helpful, and tune again next time.